Good morning, it's Andy Ferguson here, and it's Tuesday the 14th of September 2016. When I was a wee boy, there used to be a TV programme on, it was called Connections, and it was delivered by a guy called Michael Burke. Michael Burke, as far as I can remember, was actually an English graduate, but he had got work in the BBC on things like Tomorrow's World, and he covered the Apollo moon landings. But after that was finished, he started this TV programme called Connections. And the whole point about Connections was that he told a story, a narrative, linking up a whole series of scientific and economic and social ideas that explain how, because these things all went together, we ended up somewhere, or some people ended up somewhere. So this idea that there was this connection that you wouldn't have been aware of necessarily at the time, which led one thing to another. And I suspect that for most of my life, I don't know how many other people are out there that are like this, but I see connections sometimes where other people don't. I make connections. But one of the fascinating things is that often I don't make connections. We don't make connections. And so I'd like to tell a few stories this morning and just pose some questions about what these connections are, or how these stories might link together. So the first thing I was thinking about was about 2 years ago, sorry, get this right, 2 years ago, my daughter Alex went off to Borneo on a thing called Rally International, and it's a project where it's really to develop young people. It's develop them as they enter adulthood, if you like. So they go on an expedition. They work with other young people, young men and women after they left school. Maybe some of them are at university. Maybe some of them are slightly older. But nevertheless, it's mainly young people who go away and they go on an adventure, an arduous expedition. And during that time, they'll bond and they start to be able to appreciate that the world that they were brought up in and live in is not necessarily the whole world, that there is this more challenging, more basic world out there, and they have to learn how to look after themselves. And I remember, and also they do a section of environmental work that again raises their awareness of the environment, that wider environment that we all are a part of. And one of the things that I thought quite not funny, but I couldn't get my head around at one point, is that Alex was out in the jungle for about 10 or 12 days, and they went for a trek, and they kind of went into a trek in the jungle, and they went around the trek out of the jungle, and so forth. And I thought that was it was interesting, but I would get really bored or frustrated doing that myself, I think. And I realised that I was missing the point. I was missing the point that the point wasn't a holiday, and it wasn't necessarily going and doing meaningful work on that phase. It was actually designed to help them develop the skills and the awareness and the fortitude to be able to operate in an environment that's different to you and I's normal daily day environment. And it's coming up to 2 years since Alex went off and did that. She did it for 10 weeks. She came back. She had a place at university, but she didn't want to go straight to university, so she found herself a job through the internet. She found herself a job up near the Arctic Circle in Sweden, and she nannied over the winter for a Swedish family out the middle of nowhere. And during that time, she not only had to develop her ability to live in a very different environment to the one she was brought up in, a much colder, darker, in some ways more serious, more remote environment, but she also had to look after Niels and take him about, and the wee boy, and sometimes the weather was atrocious, and it was a lot of responsibility. And following that, she then went and lived with a rich Italian family down in the Mediterranean and looked after their 3 children before she went to uni. Recently, Alex, as some of you may know, took the summer between her first and second year at university and went and lived with a family down in Tanzania. The interesting thing, the reason I'm telling that story is simply this. that by exposing herself to new situations, to new environments, she not only discovered something about the world that she didn't know about before, but she also started to discover things about herself that she didn't know before. And I think that's really interesting, that some people have a desire to go out and explore the world and discover something about themselves. And other people tend to just want to follow the environment, the process, whatever you want to call it, the circumstance that they're in, and they learn to cope with that, and they learn to make the best of that, rather than seeking to put themselves into a new situation. So about 30 years ago, I was coming up for my 25th birthday, and I decided that I wasn't, the environment, the circumstance I was in wasn't stimulating enough for me. And this is a long time before gap years came along, or career breaks or whatever it is. So 25, I took myself off to France, and it's a long story, but I cleaned toilets in apartments. I didn't speak French, but I learned to get by, and eventually, after a few different back and forth little stories and adventures, I became a ski instructor out in France. And it was quite difficult to become a ski instructor out in France. The French didn't particularly want foreign people working in their ski resorts. The little ski villages certainly didn't even like people coming from different villages. They had a resource in their neighbourhood, which was high mountains and snow, and people want to come skiing, and they tried to manage that in such a way that it provided employment and opportunities for the people in that area, which is fine. I understand that. And they made it very difficult for people like me, a British person, to become a ski instructor in France. And eventually, they made it so difficult that the companies that I was working for said, we don't want to employ British people. So I came home. And it was only many, many, many years later that I actually thought about, I was thinking about the world, and I was thinking about how lucky I'd been to be a ski instructor in a little window. Now, I mentioned Michael Burke, and I said that he made these programs about connections. But before that, I'd worked on the Apollo coverage of the Apollo moon landings. And one of the fascinating things about the Apollo moon landings is that the guys that landed, the 12 guys that landed on the moon, and they were guys, there was no women there. So again, think about that. So there's 12 guys landed on the moon in the late 60s and the early 70s. They all had birthdays within something like 18 months or 2 years of each other. So in other words, although there were plenty of talented potential astronauts around, if you'd wanted to land on the moon, your birthday had to be within a certain range, because they were looking for certain criteria in order to pick the astronauts that went to the moon. So if you were born 4 years too early or 4 years too late, you hadn't a hope. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that I find when I work with people is that they struggle with something, and when you take them out of the environment and give them a different perspective, you realise that actually the circumstances have to be just right to fulfil their ambition for what they want to be able to do. It doesn't matter how clever, how hard-working, how much resource you put in it. If the circumstances aren't right, if the time is wrong, it's not going to work for you. And I'll give you an example of something, the circumstances that have to be right in order for me to have been a ski instructor at that moment in time. I really probably had to be born in the 20th century, because there wasn't ski instructors before the 20th century. Right? There had to be enough people coming on ski holidays to generate the income and infrastructure to build a great big expensive lifts that lift people up into the mountains. So really we're talking about the latter half of the 20th century. There had to be a moment in time where the sort of politics of Europe was opening up so that more people were being able to work again in other European countries. And after Britain's voted for Brexit, we don't really know how that's going to work out in the future. We had to be at a point in our technological history where we could actually build the big, huge ski lifts that lifted people into the mountains. And in fact, we had to be at the point technologically where we could build safe, reliable aeroplanes that could take holidaymakers en masse from one place to another, in our case from Britain to France. We had to be at a point where socially we had leisure time, that people had vacation time and the money to go on vacations. Because if the money was there to build the ski resorts, if the engineering was there, if the understanding of generating energy, which is required to lift people up the mountain, so we talk about ski lifts, but skiing's enjoyable because you don't have to climb up the mountain, you get to ski down it, you get what appears to be free energy from gravity, but it's not free energy, it's energy that's produced by diesel motors that lift the skiers up on chairlifts and on big gondolas and huge telecabines and things. So when you actually think about all of the necessary steps in human development, in science and technology and economics and social welfare, when you think about all the different factors that have to develop, have to mature in order for somebody like me to be a ski instructor, there is a small window, yeah? And I never realised that at the time. I never realised that the opportunities and the challenges we face in day-to-day life have a sequence and an interconnectedness that we often miss because we're too busy in there and we're too busy accepting that that's just the way the world is. Now, yesterday I talked about desire, I talked about excitement, and I talked about commitment. And I said that in order to live a happy, fulfilled and rewarding life, generally we have to have something that drives us, that excites us, that engages us. That there has to be a desire and an excitement that we're looking for in our lives. That we have to commit resources in order to bring that thing from the outside, whether it's our safety, our nourishment, it doesn't really matter what it is, we need to act in order to be able to get a reaction from the universe and get what we need. But today I'd just like to point out that we can act all we want, we can demand all we want, we can demand, like Steve Jobs, that we're going to put a dent in the universe. But what I found very helpful when I work with people now is to actually reverse out of that. What's the universe capable of delivering for you right now? What are the circumstances that actually have to be in place in order for you to get what you really desire? What is it that you can do that fits, that locksteps in with where the world is at this moment, so that you and it can both get what you need? And when you see people and businesses and communities, nations, as a collective group of people who are trying to find what they need and want at that moment in time, then taking a moment to understand what they need and want at that time and what the circumstances are means that you might be able to find the thing that just makes that possible for them. And if you do that, there's a chance that you will find rewarding work there. And if it's something that you are particularly interested in and particularly excited by, the chances are it's going to be fulfilling, rewarding and fun work. That's what I wanted you to think about today, because it'll stop us running about trying to do things that the environment says, whoa, we're not ready for this yet, or that was yesterday. What we need today is what's necessary today. And so I just wanted to leave you this final thought. The human race for the last 200,000 years has been developing. I've been watching programs the last couple of nights on TV about the cosmologists trying to understand what the universe is and how big it is. And I would suggest to you that perhaps our work day in and day out is simply to create the infrastructure, to create the circumstances that allows some of us, the scientists and the explorers, to go out and discover more about our universe, more about why we're here, more about what's really going on. And that our job, you and I, is just to move that whole process, that whole circumstance on. Remember I said that I couldn't have been a ski instructor unless there was a whole series of social, economic and technological factors all coming together at the same point. Well, our journey as human beings to develop a greater understanding of who we are, it's only in the last 100 years, the last 50 years, that we've been able to start to see beyond our own galaxy, to beyond the structure of the universe, and to start to really explore that. It's only in the last 50 years that we've been able to build supercomputers that connect us together and allow us to come together and share resources and ideas. The world is definitely changing. Right now, today, there is 1 million people travelling in aircrafts all around the world. The infrastructure, the social infrastructure, the political infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, to create that opportunity for us to move about, to share ideas, to move food about, to learn about each other, is a relative new thing. So what am I suggesting today? I'm suggesting that when you stop, and I'd suggest you do stop today, and just think, what is the point of me being here? Then you can maybe perhaps see that the point is just to be a part of this. Because being a part of it moves the whole project along. It creates the social, economic and technical circumstances for our species to move its story further on. You and I are part of history. Our story is being set as we speak, and it's a very exciting one. It's certainly a very rich one. If you consider what our lives would have been like 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, I don't think it would be as rich in many ways. Not for the majority of us. Now there's so many of us, and we have got so many opportunities to share and create and understand and challenge and ask deep and profound questions, and actually start to find answers to those, as opposed to, well, I don't really know, so we'll assign it to the gods. Yeah? And yet we've also got to look at what we've lost as we've developed this. We've got to ask ourselves, well, what is it that we had in the past that we maybe should revisit and bring back into the way that we live our lives. So this has been a very thoughtful presentation this morning. Not the usual let's go out and do stuff, and yeah, let's much more about, before we go out and do anything, let's consider the circumstances that exist around us and within us, and let's see how we can connect those two things in a way that makes our life fun and rewarding and worthwhile, and it actually makes other people's life fun, rewarding and worthwhile, and sets up the circumstances that we move forward in this journey that we as a species are on. So this has been Andy Ferguson. Any thoughts, let me know, send me a message. If you enjoy these, please share them and let other people know about them. I'm going to say this repeatedly now. I work with people who are often stuck and frustrated because the reason that they're stuck and frustrated is they have something of real value, but they've not aligned what they find valuable with the circumstances, and therefore the circumstances, the world and ours, is not getting what it needs and wants out of them, and they're not getting what they want and need out of the world. And if you know someone like that, or if you know someone that knows someone like that, who's stuck and frustrated and not contributing, then they're missing out and we're missing out. So please pass this around. Let people know that there's a guide and a teacher out there that helps people who are stuck and frustrated to actually re-engage and refocus and re-energize their energies into doing things that make their life rewarding, fulfilling and fun. This has been Andy Ferguson, and I will talk to you soon.